Welcome to Life Stories, where we explore meaningful moments that teach us about resilience, empathy, and the strength of the human spirit. Today's story is a powerful reminder of how one individual's quiet determination can confront bias and demand respect without ever raising a voice. It's about a CEO on his way home, faced with an unexpected challenge at the airport check-in counter, and how he turned that moment into a lesson we all can learn from. Subscribe to Life Stories to hear more tales of personal triumph and profound life lessons. Let's begin today's journey. I still remember the hum of the airport terminal that day, a place alive with hurried energy as travelers bustled toward their gates, dragging suitcases and glancing at their phones for last-minute updates. I stood in the midst of it all, the kind of person who would normally blend into the crowd. I wasn't a celebrity or a known public figure. No cameras followed me. No reporters waited to jot down my words. I was just a man returning home after a long stretch of work in another city, eager to get back to my own bed and familiar surroundings. Yet, on that particular day, my presence in the terminal turned into an incident I couldn't have foreseen, one that I would carry with me. A small but sharp reminder of the subtle ways the world can still surprise you, both for better and worse. I had flown to New York for a major tech conference. The sort of event where innovators and investors mingle, sharing ideas and visions for what's to come. It was the culmination of months of preparation, hours spent perfecting presentations, strategizing over new product launches, and building connections that I hoped would take my company to the next level. It had gone well, better than I'd expected. Actually, and though I left the conference tired, I was proud of what I'd accomplished. It was a quiet kind of pride. The kind I kept to myself. I wasn't one to boast or seek attention. I preferred my achievements to speak for themselves. My parents had raised me that way. Work hard. Keep your head down. Let your actions tell the story. And so I moved through the terminal with the same understated confidence, carrying a small carry-on and wearing a tailored suit that was more about comfort than showing off. I had no illusions of grandeur. I was just another passenger heading home. Just another man making his way in the world. Or so I thought. When I approached the first-class check-in counter, my thoughts were already elsewhere. I was mentally drafting a follow-up email to a potential investor, thinking about the weekend plans I'd made with my family, and maybe, just maybe, daydreaming a little about the book I'd been meaning to read on the flight. I barely registered the woman behind the counter, a middle-aged employee who looked as though she'd seen too many rushed travelers that day. I handed over my ticket and passport with a polite nod, expecting nothing more than the usual routine, a quick confirmation, a boarding pass handed back, and have a nice flight. But something shifted when she finally glanced up at me. I saw it in her face. A moment of hesitation, followed by something subtler but unmistakable, doubt. She raised her eyebrows slightly, as if sizing me up, and then her tone changed. It wasn't rude exactly, but it wasn't what I'd call welcoming either. "Sir, are you sure you're in the right line?" she asked, her voice hovering between condescension and surprise. For a brief moment, I wasn't sure how to respond. It seemed so out of place, so unnecessary. I'd already handed her my ticket. She could see it was first class. There should have been no question. But something in her tone, something in the way she looked at me, made it clear that she wasn't just asking about my seat assignment. It felt like a question about me, about whether I belonged there at all. "Yes," I said evenly, meeting her gaze. "I'm checking in for first class." She hesitated again, her lips pressing into a thin line. Then she leaned over her keyboard and began typing. Though it didn't look as though she was doing anything meaningful, she didn't look at me again, instead staring at the screen as though searching for a problem that might justify her reaction. After a few moments, she let out a soft sigh. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her voice now laden with false sympathy. "It appears there's been a mistake. Your ticket has been downgraded to economy class." For a long moment, I just stood there, the words hanging in the air. A part of me wanted to believe it was an honest error. But another part of me, the part that had been through similar experiences before, that recognized the quiet, unspoken prejudices that sometimes surface in the most ordinary settings, knew exactly what was happening. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. I was supposed to step aside. To accept the downgrade without argument. To quietly move on and let her assumptions go unchallenged. But I couldn't. Not this time. I had paid for my seat. Fair and square. I had worked hard for the place I occupied in life. For the successes I had achieved. I wasn't about to let someone else's biases dictate where I belonged. So I took a breath and replied calmly. There must be a misunderstanding. I purchased a first-class ticket. And I would appreciate it if you could correct this. Her smile grew even tighter. I'm sorry, sir. But there's nothing I can do. The system has already changed. If you'd like to fly first class, you'll need to buy another ticket. Another ticket. I felt the weight of her words. Not just the financial absurdity of paying twice for the same seat. But the underlying implication. That no matter how far I'd come. No matter what I'd achieved. Someone like me could still be asked to prove, over and over again, that I deserved to be there. This wasn't about the money. It wasn't about comfort. It was about respect. And at that moment, I knew I couldn't let this slide. Not this time. My breath was steady, but inside, I could feel the growing tension. It was a kind of pressure I'd encountered before. An all too familiar reminder of the invisible lines some people still drew around opportunity and respect. But it wasn't in me to raise my voice or cause a scene. Even if I wanted to. That wasn't my style. Instead, I focused on what I could control, staying calm, staying clear, and staying firm. I understand that's what the system shows. I said evenly, but I'm certain this is a mistake. I paid for first class. I have the receipt. I'd appreciate it if you could look into this further. The woman's expression hardened. Her tone clipped. I'm sorry, sir. There's nothing more I can do. You'll have to resolve it with customer service. Is there someone I can speak to right now? I asked. Perhaps a supervisor? She shook her head. Her voice curt now. You can call the airline's customer service number. That's the best I can do. I hesitated, considering my options. On the one hand, I could have stepped aside, pulled out my phone, and spent the next hour arguing with a faceless representative while my boarding time ticked closer. But on the other hand, why should I have to go through all that? Why was it my responsibility to untangle a mess I hadn't made? I looked at her again, standing behind that counter, her arms crossed, her lips pressed into a thin line of finality. In that moment, I realized something. This wasn't about a system error or a ticket mix-up. This was about someone deciding, for reasons of their own, that I didn't belong where I had every right to be. And that stung. It wasn't the first time I'd encountered this kind of quiet, insidious discrimination, but that didn't make it any easier. Still, I wasn't about to let anger take over. I knew from experience that reacting out of frustration wouldn't get me anywhere. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and made a single call. Hi, I said when the person on the other end picked up. It's Nathan Price. I need some help with an issue at the airport. I kept my voice calm and professional. There was no need to explain every detail yet, just enough to get someone who could actually make a difference. The person on the other end listened carefully, then promised to get back to me within a few minutes. I thanked them, ended the call, and stepped aside to wait. Less than 5 minutes passed before a man in a tailored suit appeared, moving quickly through the terminal until he spotted me. He was an airline executive, someone I'd spoken with briefly at a corporate event months earlier. I recognized him immediately, and so did the woman behind the counter. Her posture shifted the moment she saw him. Mr. Price, the executive said as he approached, extending his hand. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. I came as soon as I heard there was an issue. Thank you for coming, I said, shaking his hand. It seems there's been a mix-up with my first-class ticket. I was told it had been downgraded to economy. But I know that's not right. The executive turned to the woman at the counter. Is that true? Her face went pale. I'm not sure how it happened. The system must have. He cut her off gently but firmly. We'll look into that later. For now, Mr. Price's original seat will be reinstated immediately. As she scrambled to make the correction, I felt a small measure of relief. Not just because I'd get the seat I'd paid for, but because someone in a position of authority had stepped in and acknowledged that something wasn't right. It was a rare moment of validation. And while it didn't erase the sting of what had happened, it reminded me that standing firm and staying professional could sometimes lead to the outcome I deserved. Soon enough, my boarding pass was back in my hand, and the executive apologized once more. "I'll personally ensure that this doesn't happen again," he said, "and please let me know if there's anything else we can do to make this right." "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate your help." As I walked away from the counter, I glanced over my shoulder briefly. The woman stood there, her hands trembling slightly, her face flushed. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired. There were no loud words, no dramatic confrontations, no grand gestures, just the quiet, steady determination to be treated with the respect I knew I deserved, and the hope that next time, I boarded the plane, settled into my seat, and closed my eyes. Despite everything, I felt a small measure of peace. Not because I had won, in some way, but because I'd stayed true to myself. I had spoken up for what was right without anger, without spite, and without losing my composure. In the end, it wasn't about a seat on an airplane. It was about how we choose to handle the moments when we're challenged, disrespected, or misunderstood. As the plane began to taxi down the runway, I thought about the woman at the counter. I didn't know her story or what had shaped her perspective, but I hoped that this experience would give her something to reflect on. Maybe, just maybe, it would lead her to reconsider her assumptions the next time she saw someone like me at her counter. And perhaps, in that reconsideration, the next person wouldn't have to make a phone call or rely on a connection to be treated fairly. We all have those moments when life gives us an opportunity to stand up. Not for attention or pride, but simply because it's the right thing to do. I don't know if that day made a difference for her or for anyone else who saw what happened. But I know it made a difference for me. It reminded me of the quiet strength that comes from holding onto one's dignity, of the importance of speaking up with integrity, and of the power of respect, both given and received. If this story has touched you, please subscribe to Life Stories to hear more tales of everyday people navigating life's unexpected twists. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.